I never imagined my life could be flipped upside down by an alien neighbor. Sure, I'd heard about the Galactic Exchange Program, but like most people, I assumed it was a distant, abstract idea, something happening in big cities or far-off spaceports, not in the quiet suburbs where I lived. I guess that's why when Mr. Thompson, our building manager, announced it, I wasn't prepared. It started on a Tuesday morning, the kind where nothing remarkable ever happens. I was enjoying my usual breakfast of toast and coffee when Mr. Thompson's voice crackled over the outdated intercom system. Attention, tenants. We have an exciting announcement today. The Galactic Exchange Program has selected our humble building for their latest integration. Please welcome your new neighbor, our very own ambassador from the stars. I nearly spit out my coffee. My apartment building? Out of all the places in the universe, they picked this rundown complex. It didn't make sense. The elevator barely worked, the plumbing was a nightmare, and half the tenants hadn't paid rent in months. How were we supposed to be a shining example of interspecies harmony? Nevertheless, the rumors spread fast. By lunchtime, everyone was buzzing with gossip. Mrs. Henderson from 3B swore she'd seen the alien spaceship land in the middle of the night. Mark, the conspiracy theorist in 2F, claimed the government was already setting up surveillance in the basement. And of course, my perpetually enthusiastic building manager was treating this like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. "You'll love it, Evan," Mr. Thompson said, cornering me in the hallway. He was a short man with a balding head and a clipboard that seemed glued to his hand. His enthusiasm was contagious, even if it was often misplaced. "This is groundbreaking. Imagine the stories we'll have to tell." I wasn't so sure. I'd moved into the building because it was quiet, unassuming. I worked from home as a freelance designer, and the last thing I needed was drama, let alone alien drama. "Don't worry, they're totally harmless," he added, noticing my hesitation. I read the brief. "She's from a planet called Zytral, part of the Andorian system. Very peaceful race. They sent us one of their best names, Nira." "Right," I said, faking a smile. "Harmless. Got it." But I still wasn't convinced. My anxiety about meeting new neighbors wasn't helped by the fact that this one had come from another galaxy. Later that evening, as I returned from grabbing groceries, I caught my first glimpse of Nira's arrival. I'd just stepped out of my car when I noticed the large, looming shadow blocking out the fading sun. I looked up to see a spaceship hovering over the building, a sleek, silvery craft that shimmered like it was made of liquid metal. The sight alone made my stomach twist. The ship descended slowly, emitting a low hum that vibrated through the pavement beneath my feet. I stood frozen as the ramp lowered, the air shimmering with energy as the outline of a tall figure appeared at the top. And then, there she was. Nira stood at least 7 feet tall, her body covered in dark, iridescent scales that seemed to change color with the light. Her eyes, large and luminous, glowed with an intense, unearthly hue, shifting between shades of green and blue. She had a humanoid form, but everything about her felt alien, from the way her skin shimmered to the thick, dark tendrils that cascaded down her back in place of hair. I couldn't help but stare as she walked down the ramp with an eerie, graceful movement, as though gravity didn't quite affect her the same way it did the rest of us. Her tendrils moved independently, swaying like they had minds of their own, and her long, clawed fingers clutched a cylindrical object that looked part technology, part plant. She approached Mr. Thompson, who was practically bouncing with excitement. He was already holding out a clipboard, ready to welcome her with the same bureaucratic glee he used for new tenants. "Welcome, welcome," he chirped, beaming up at her. "We're so thrilled to have you here, Nira. You'll love it. Very quiet place. People mind their business. And of course, we're all about community." Nira tilted her head slightly, her glowing eyes narrowing as if assessing her surroundings. Her gaze swept over the small crowd of tenants who had gathered outside, and for a brief, unsettling moment, her eyes locked onto mine. I couldn't look away, frozen under the intensity of her stare. Was she sizing me up? Then, in a voice that was surprisingly soft, yet layered with a strange echo, she spoke. I thank you for the welcome, Human Thompson. Her words sent a chill down my spine. They weren't just words, they vibrated in the air, as if the sound was something alive. Mr. Thompson, however, didn't seem to notice, still grinning like this was the highlight of his year. Right this way, he said, leading her toward the building entrance. Your apartment's all set up. We've made sure it's up to your species standards. Special modifications, top of the line. I'm sure you'll feel right at home. I watched her disappear into the building, still trying to wrap my mind around what I'd just seen. An alien was living in the apartment right next to mine. How was this real? As I headed back to my apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The hum of the ship still rang in my ears, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, those glowing eyes staring into me like they knew something I didn't. Like she had chosen this building, this moment, for a reason. That night, I lay awake in bed, listening to the creaks and groans of the old building. But now, there was something else in the air, something unfamiliar. The low hum of alien technology thrummed through the walls, like an invisible heartbeat. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I'd get used to it. But deep down, I knew that things would never be the same. Nero wasn't just any new neighbor. And I wasn't prepared for what came next. At first, life with Nira as my neighbor was surprisingly normal. Sure, I occasionally caught glimpses of her through the narrow hallway window as she returned from her late-night walks or stared at the stars from the rooftop. Her presence was unsettling, but in a quiet, almost eerie way. She wasn't disruptive. In fact, she barely made any noise at all. The first couple of weeks passed in relative silence. I told myself maybe this wouldn't be so bad. Maybe Nira, despite her alien nature, was just another tenant who preferred to keep to herself. After all, she was from a peaceful species, right? I kept my head down, focusing on work and trying to ignore the fact that an alien lived just one thin wall away. But things started to change. It was subtle at first, barely noticeable, but I began to pick up on strange new sounds. It wasn't loud music or partying. It was different. The first time I heard it, I was working on a freelance project late at night, tapping away at my laptop when a low, vibrating hum resonated through the walls. It was rhythmic, pulsing, almost like a heartbeat, but deeper. I paused and listened, trying to pinpoint the source. It was coming from Nira's apartment. The hum continued, unchanging, for about 10 minutes before it abruptly stopped. Confused, I brushed it off as alien tech. Maybe it was just some kind of machine she used for sleep. I knew Zytrillians didn't need sleep the way we did. Perhaps it was a device to regulate her energy levels or something. But the sounds didn't stop. A few days later, I was woken up in the middle of the night by what sounded like chanting. I bolted upright, my heart pounding as I strained to listen. The sound was faint, barely audible, but it definitely wasn't in any language I recognized. The words, if they were words, had a strange, melodic cadence, like a song sung in whispers. I hesitated for a moment, then slipped out of bed and padded to my door. The hallway was dark, the dim emergency lights casting long shadows on the cracked plaster walls. I pressed my ear to the wall, and the chanting grew clearer, though still muffled. It came in waves, rising and falling, almost hypnotic. What was she doing in there? I thought about knocking on her door, but something told me not to. Instead, I crept back to bed and tried to sleep, though it was impossible with that eerie chanting reverberating through my head. The next morning, I ran into Nira in the hallway. She was heading out, wearing what looked like a cloak made from some kind of shimmering material that shifted colors as she moved. She nodded politely at me, her glowing eyes unreadable as always. "Morning, Nira," I said, trying to sound casual. "Late night, huh?" She paused for a moment, studying me in that unsettling way she had. Her tendrils moved ever so slightly, as if they were listening too. "Mating season approaches," she said softly, her voice carrying that strange echo that made the hair on my arms stand up. "Mating season?" I repeated, caught off guard. I had no idea what she was talking about. Nira's lips curled into what I assumed was a smile, though it looked more like a baring of sharp, pointed teeth. "Yes," she replied, almost as if I should have known. "The Zytrillian mating season is a sacred time. There are preparations to be made." I blinked, unsure how to respond. Right. Well, I'll, try not to disturb you." Nira inclined her head slightly. "The rituals are quiet, but powerful. The energy of this time is unpredictable. It would be wise to prepare." She walked past me without another word, her tendrils swaying behind her. The air felt cooler in her wake, as if the temperature had dropped by several degrees. As soon as she was gone, I leaned back against my door, my mind racing. Prepare? For what? And why did her words send a chill down my spine? The next few days were a blur of strange activity. Large crates began arriving at nearest door, alien deliveries from the galactic shipyards. I didn't ask what was in them, but they didn't look like your standard Amazon packages, that's for sure. Each crate was covered in glowing symbols I couldn't decipher, and I could hear faint buzzing sounds coming from inside, as if the objects within were alive. One evening, as I returned home, I caught Nira carefully arranging the crates in a specific pattern around her apartment. I could see through the crack in her door as I passed by. She placed them with meticulous precision, almost as if it were part of some ritual. The glowing symbols on the crates pulsed in sync with the strange hums that seemed to emanate from them. I couldn't take it anymore. Curiosity and, I'll admit, fear got the better of me. "Hey, Nira," I called from the hallway, knocking on her open doorframe. "What's all this?" Nira straightened up and turned to face me, her eyes glowing with that soft, otherworldly light. She didn't seem surprised to see me. "These are the ceremonial conduits," she explained, as if that clarified anything. "They channel the energy needed for the mating ritual." "Mating ritual?" I echoed, feeling more confused by the minute. Are you expecting someone? Like, another Zytrillian?" She tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "No. The ritual is a solo process. But the energy it releases is far-reaching." Her words sent a ripple of unease through me. "Right. And, what happens during this process? Just curious." She smiled again, those sharp teeth flashing for just a second. "The energy will transform. It will reshape, evolve, and adapt. This building will feel the change." That didn't sound good. I didn't know what Zytrillian mating rituals involved, but if it had anything to do with reshaping and evolving, I was pretty sure I didn't want to be around for it. "Well, just, let me know if there's anything I need to do," I said, backing away slightly. "You know, to prepare." Nira's glowing eyes lingered on me, as if she were studying my very being. "Be mindful of the signs," she said cryptically. "The energy will call to you. You may find yourself changed." With that unsettling remark, she turned back to her crates, leaving me standing in the hallway, thoroughly spooked. I hurried back to my apartment and shut the door, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. Something big. That night, the hums returned louder, more insistent. The walls vibrated, and every few minutes, a strange flicker of light would seep through the cracks around Nira's door. I lay in bed, wide awake, listening to the alien sounds surrounding me. As the hours ticked by, I realized Nira's warnings weren't just words. Something was happening. The air felt heavier, charged with an electric pulse that buzzed in my ears. I tried to sleep, But every time I closed my eyes, I could feel the hum vibrating in my chest, like a distant heartbeat syncing with my own. Nira had said to prepare. But how could I prepare for something I didn't understand? As the strange hums filled the night, I began to wonder, was it too late to leave? I barely slept that night, the hums and flickers of light seeping through the thin walls of my apartment. Nira's strange behavior had gone from being a minor curiosity to something much more unsettling. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the odd vibrations from next door seemingly syncing with my own heartbeat. It felt like the building itself was alive now, pulsing with some kind of alien energy I couldn't explain. Every hair on my body stood on edge as if I were on the verge of witnessing something terrible. By the time dawn finally broke, I was exhausted. I dragged myself out of bed and tried to go about my day, pretending things were normal. But it wasn't long before I noticed more changes. It started when I went into the kitchen. The glass of water I had left on the counter the night before was vibrating tiny ripples on the surface, as though a subtle tremor was passing through the building. I placed my hand on the counter, and sure enough, I could feel it. A steady, almost imperceptible thrum. It was like the walls themselves were breathing, alive with that same low, rhythmic hum. I tried to brush it off. Maybe it was the building's ancient pipes acting up again. But when I went out for my usual jog around the block, I noticed the world outside didn't seem quite right either. The air was thick, oppressive, and my surroundings seemed sharper somehow, more vivid, like someone had turned the contrast way up on reality. Even the sky felt closer, as if it were pressing down on me. I chalked it up to a lack of sleep. When I returned to the building, though, the strange phenomena had intensified. There were new sounds now, clicking noises, like mechanical insects tapping on the walls. Occasionally, a high-pitched whine would break through the low hum, followed by a burst of light from Nira's apartment. It was like living next to a malfunctioning alien reactor. By nightfall, I was officially on edge. That evening, I sat on my couch, nervously glancing toward the wall that separated my apartment from Nira's. The strange hum had grown louder, now a constant presence that seemed to vibrate in the very air around me. The light flickering through the cracks was more frequent too, like there was some kind of unstable energy building on the other side. Then, at precisely 11:47 p.m., everything changed. It started with a bang, a sharp, deafening sound, like a gunshot, but it wasn't from a gun. It came from Nira's apartment. I jumped up, heart pounding, and for a second, I thought about calling the police. But what would I even say? That my alien neighbor's mating ritual was getting out of hand? They'd think I was crazy. Before I could decide what to do, the air in my apartment seemed to shift. There was a pressure now, a heavy, suffocating presence, as if the atmosphere itself had thickened. The lights flickered. The hum turned into a low, ominous drone, and my ears began to ring. Then, from the hallway, I heard a sound that sent a chill down my spine, a deep, guttural growl. It wasn't human. I moved to the door, peeking through the peephole. At first, I saw nothing but the dim hallway lights. But then something moved, something large. I squinted, my breath catching in my throat as a shadow passed by Nira's door. Whatever it was too big to be her. It was hulking, its outline blurry as if it were phasing in and out of view. My brain tried to make sense of it. Maybe it was a trick of the light, but deep down, I knew better. The alien energy had done something. Nira's mating season wasn't just some ritual. It was a transformation. Before I could react, the door to Nira's apartment burst open with a blinding flash of light, and that growl echoed through the hallway again, louder, more feral. I stumbled back from the peephole, my heart hammering in my chest. My mind raced. I needed to get out, to leave the building now. I grabbed my jacket and rushed to the door, but just as I reached for the handle, the entire building shook violently. The lights flickered again and then went out, plunging everything into darkness. Panic gripped me. I fumbled for my phone, using the dim glow of the screen to navigate. In the pitch-black hallway, I could hear the faint sound of footsteps, heavy, deliberate, and getting closer. My breath caught in my throat as I realized the growling had stopped. Whatever was out there, it was moving silently now, stalking through the dark. I stood frozen, listening. There was a faint clicking sound, almost like claws tapping against the floor. Then, just outside my door, a low, rasping breath. I didn't dare move. My back pressed against the door, and I held my breath, praying that whatever was out there wouldn't sense me. Seconds felt like hours as I stood there, waiting for something to happen. Then, without warning, the air around me changed again. It wasn't just the pressure this time, it was something more. I could feel the energy crackling in the air, like static electricity raising the hair on the back of my neck. My entire body tingled, as if I were standing too close to a live wire. Suddenly, a bright light exploded from Nira's apartment, flooding the hallway and leaking under my door. I scrambled back, shielding my eyes from the blinding glow. The walls seemed to pulse with it, glowing as if they had absorbed the light. Then came the scream. It wasn't human, and it wasn't Nira either. It was a deep, monstrous roar that rattled the very foundation of the building. I heard the walls creak, the floors groan. The windows shook in their frames, and somewhere down the hall, I heard glass shatter. And then it stopped. The light vanished as suddenly as it had appeared, plunging the hallway back into darkness. Silence followed, an eerie, oppressive silence that made my skin crawl. I slowly lowered my hand from my eyes, trying to make sense of what had just happened. After what felt like an eternity, I gathered the courage to open the door. The hallway was empty, save for the flickering emergency lights that had kicked on. But Nira's apartment door was wide open, a dim glow still pulsing from within. My stomach churned with fear, but something curiosity, maybe, or the need for answers drove me forward. I stepped into the hallway, every nerve in my body on high alert. As I approached Nira's door, the air seemed to buzz with leftover energy, like a storm that had just passed. I peered inside. What I saw wasn't Nira. Standing in the center of her apartment was a figure taller than Nira, broader, with thick, glowing tendrils snaking across its body. Its skin shimmered in the same iridescent pattern, but it was darker, more violent, like molten metal ready to erupt. The creature turned its glowing eyes toward me, and I realized with horror that this was Nira. Or rather, what she had become. She or it was no longer the calm, collected alien neighbor I'd once known. The transformation was complete. Nira's body had contorted into something monstrous, her once sleek figure now hulking, her tendrils moving erratically, like serpents hungry for prey. I took a step back, every instinct in my body screaming at me to run. But before I could move, Nira or the creature she had become let out another deafening roar, and the building shook again. That was when I realized this wasn't just about her transformation. Whatever energy Nira had unleashed, it was spreading. And now, I was caught in the middle of it. The moment Nira or whatever she had become let out that primal, ear-splitting roar, the entire building seemed to shudder in response. Plaster cracked and crumbled from the ceiling. Lights flickered and died. I stumbled back, barely able to keep my footing as the floor beneath me trembled. The hum I had been hearing for days intensified, morphing into something far more menacing. It wasn't just sound anymore, it was a presence, a force that seemed to pulse with life. Panic surged through me, and I turned to run. The hallway, now bathed in eerie emergency lighting, twisted and warped in my vision. My only thought was escape. I had to get out before the building came down. But even as I ran, I could feel the energy Nira had unleashed crawling along my skin, seeping into the very air I was breathing. It was like the atmosphere had changed, thickened, pressing down on me from all sides. I reached the stairwell, but as I grabbed the railing, something strange happened. The metal was hot, almost burning to the touch, and I could feel a buzzing sensation rippling through my palm, like static electricity. I yanked my hand back, my skin tingling. The stairwell was bathed in an unnatural light, pale, sickly green, and as I looked down the steps, I realized the source. The floor below was glowing. Not just the floor, the walls, the stairs, everything was pulsing with that same alien energy. I stood frozen at the top of the stairwell, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I could hear the deep, rhythmic hum all around me, now vibrating through my bones. The building was alive. It was like I had stepped into some kind of living organism, and it was reacting to Nira's transformation. I had to get out, but the more I stared down the stairs, the more I realized there was no safe way down. The glow was spreading, and with it, the air seemed to thicken, distorting the space itself. I didn't know if I could make it through. That's when I heard the growl again, this time from behind me. Slowly, I turned to face the hallway, and my blood turned cold. Nira was there, standing at the far end of the corridor. But she wasn't alone. The thing that had once been Nira was even larger now, her form hulking and distorted, with glowing tendrils that writhed and lashed out as though they had minds of their own. Her eyes blazed with an intense, otherworldly light, and her skin shimmered with energy, almost too bright to look at. But it wasn't just her presence that terrified me. There was something else. Shapes indistinct at first, like shadows peeling themselves away from the walls, emerged around her. They were humanoid in form, but twisted, their outlines flickering like static on a broken TV screen. Their eyes glowed with the same green light, and they moved with an unnatural, jerky grace, as if they weren't fully in sync with our reality. Nira let out another growl, and the shadows responded, slinking forward like predators stalking their prey. My heart raced, panic flooding my veins. I backed away slowly, keeping my eyes on the approaching figures. They weren't moving fast, but they were deliberate, as if they knew there was nowhere for me to run. I had to think. Had to do something, anything to escape. But as I scanned the hallway, the flickering emergency lights, the crumbling walls, I realized there was only one way out. Up. With one last glance at the advancing shadows, I bolted for the rooftop stairs. My feet pounded against the floor as I climbed, each step accompanied by the low, insistent hum of the building's transformation. The stairwell seemed endless, the walls pressing in around me, the air growing heavier with each breath. But I kept moving, the growls and distorted sounds of the shadows close behind. Finally, I burst through the door onto the rooftop, gasping for air. The cool night breeze hit me like a slap, but it wasn't the relief I had hoped for. The sky was wrong. I don't know how else to describe it. The stars above weren't just stars anymore. They were too bright, too large, swirling in patterns that defied explanation. The air itself shimmered with that same energy I had felt downstairs, like the entire world had shifted into some alien dimension. My skin tingled with it, and I could feel the hair on the back of my neck standing on end. But there was no time to marvel at the sky. I turned back toward the rooftop door, and there she was, Nira. Or what used to be Nira. She stood at the threshold, her towering form silhouetted against the unnatural glow. Her eyes, now blazing white, locked onto mine, and I could feel the raw power radiating from her. The shadows were behind her, shifting and twisting in the doorway, waiting for her command. I took a step back, my mind racing. What did she want? Was she even aware of what she had become? Or was she just a force now, driven by the alien energy she had unleashed? For a moment, neither of us moved. The wind howled around us, carrying with it the faint echoes of that low, ever-present hum. Then, Nira spoke, or rather, the thing inside her spoke. The energy calls to you, she said, her voice layered, alien, vibrating with power. You feel it, don't you, human? It awakens within you. I froze, her words chilling me to the core. Awaken? What was she talking about? But even as I stood there, I realized that my body was reacting. The strange buzzing sensation in my hands, the tingling in my skin, it wasn't just fear. It was something else. Something deeper. The energy she had unleashed was spreading. No, I whispered, taking another step back. No, I don't want this. But Nero or the creature she had become just smiled, her teeth sharp and glowing in the dark. You cannot deny it. The transformation is not just mine. It is ours. This is what happens during Zytrillian mating season. The energy doesn't simply reshape one being. It spreads, binds, transforms. I felt a jolt of realization, a sickening twist in my gut. The warning she had given me, the strange phenomena I had been experiencing, this was all part of the ritual. It wasn't just about her transformation. It was about mine. No, I said again, more forcefully this time. I'm not changing. But even as I spoke the words, I could feel it. The energy surging through me, crackling in my veins, whispering in my mind. The hum wasn't just around me, it was inside me now. The sky above twisted again, and the ground beneath my feet seemed to pulse. I looked down at my hands, and to my horror, they were glowing. A faint, sickly green light, just like the one I had seen in the building. My skin tingled, and I could feel the energy coursing through me, warping me from the inside out. Nira stepped closer, her tendrils reaching out toward me. Embrace it, Evan. You cannot fight what you are becoming. The energy will reshape you, just as it has reshaped me. Together, we will be something more. I stumbled back, my mind racing, desperate for a way out. But there was no escape. The energy was inside me now, pulling me deeper into its grasp. My vision blurred, the world spinning, as the transformation began. The last thing I saw before everything went dark was Nira's glowing eyes, watching me with a mix of triumph and understanding. And then, I was gone.